Hello, everyone. Good day. I'm just going to take a few minutes here. I notice we're still waiting for a few people. So we should be good to go. Hello. There we go. All right, so maybe we'll get started now. There may still be a few people coming in late, as is the tradition, but that's fine. They'll catch up pretty quickly. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Really glad that you can all be part of the mentoring program the mentoring coaching program on Mexico. This is, we've been leading up to this market. For those of you who have participated in some of our previous coaching programs on Latin American book markets, Colombia and Argentina, and now, and I think we did Brazil actually a while ago too, and now Mexico. So we're pretty excited about it, and also being able to do in a year when we'll also be producing a market guide on Mexico in English and French. So something for you guys to look out for, and also we will have a stand at the Field Guadalajara. But that's enough for that for now. I wanted to welcome everybody and just give you sort of the general housekeeping rules we do for most of our webinars related to interpretation for those of you who may not have attended before or not familiar. So we will have the presentation today, and Nora will go through her slides. And then at the end of the presentation, we set aside time for questions. For those of you who need interpretation, pour accéder à l'interprétation vers le français, si vous ne l'avez pas fait encore, cliquez sur l'icône interprétation au bas de l'écran dans le commande de réunion. Et par la suite, sélectionnez la langue de votre choix, qui en ce cas sera le français. Et on aura Béatrice et Tatiana qui nous aident avec l'interprétation encore aujourd'hui. Merci à vous deux. So for those of you who don't know me, I think I've met all of you before, but for those of you who don't, my name is Gabrielle Echeverry. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Livres Canada Books. And my role here today is just to introduce our fabulous speaker and help facilitate any issues with interpretation or technical issues that might happen in the background. So I'll move on to introducing Nora, who some of you have already met and who have already perhaps hopefully started with the scheduling, getting your meetings all scheduled for this coming month. If you can. If not, please reach out to me and Nora to see if we can make any accommodations to the schedule. But I'm delighted to introduce Nora today, who's our expert consultant on the Mexican book market and independent publishing more generally. She is an author, a professor, editor, a publisher as well, I think, and a literary critic with over 10 years experience in publishing. And she's a specialist on independent publishers. She also runs the very popular Interior 403 channel on YouTube. And it provides a lot of information on reading, writing, and just the love of books through this channel. So welcome, Nora. Thank you for joining us today and for working with us on this program. I'll leave the mic to you, and thanks very much.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for this introduction. I'm really excited to share with you the landscape of Mexican independent publishing that is growing lately. Well, we are going to talk about some of this growth that has been occurring recently. But, well, first of all, well, as Gabriel told you, I have some experience. I'm mainly focused on critic, and I'm an author myself. I'm starting a little publishing house, I'd like to think. But I would like to know who you are, and especially what makes you interested in getting to know the Mexican independent market or the Mexican editorial market in general. So I don't know if we have some time for really quick introductions. I would like to to know what are your specific goals or what do you expect from this webinar and from the sessions that follow up. So I don't know if that is possible, Gabriel.
Sure, if we could, I can open up the webinar to allow the people to talk. Sorry to put people on the spot. If somebody would rather just send their information through chat, that's fine also. But maybe I'll just go with the list that we have here. So from between the lines, maybe we could start there. I'll just flip it. So see if we can see you. Oh, hello.
Can talk, but maybe my camera won't work.
Well, we see your lovely logo, so that's great.
Okay, all right. I think the camera won't work, but I can talk. I'm Amanda from Between the Lines. We're a small independent press based in Toronto, and we publish only nonfiction, only for adults, all with a social justice focus. So we do politics, environment, racism, feminism, etc. We've been around since 1977, and we've been gradually expanding our reach into different territories with rights, but not done a lot. Well, done nothing in Mexico, and not a lot in Latin America generally. So looking to try and make a move to do more of that.
Great, thank you. So let's see who else gets to talk today. Okay, and so Danielle, there we go.
It's actually Judy here.
Oh,
Danielle,
hi, Judy.
we've got you up on the boardroom table. I have no idea whether you can see. We can't see me. You can hear me. So I'm the official person, but we've got a couple of other people here in the boardroom with us to hear this information. And for us, Al Kids Books is a specialty children's publisher, and we do books for kids up to the age of 13. So no YA, some fiction, some graphic novels. Lots of picture books, so the majority of our list is picture books, and a fair bit of nonfiction in ranging in age from 6 to 13, so different age groups and different categories of nonfiction. And our goal here is really, I mean, we've been wanting to get better acquainted with a lot of different publishers in Latin America. Although we haven't been able to, make it to the Guadalajara Book Fair, which I know is one of the great places where that happens. But we're just trying to do this through research, and we feel that, we've got books that can work. We've worked with publishers in Mexico, in Colombia, in parts of Latin America, but we feel that there's, much more richness there. And so that's really our goal, is selling rights. We're not interested in physical distribution to the market. We really want to sell rights, and we want to have a better understanding of how the Mexican market runs.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks.
Let me see now. Emily. I hope, there we go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm Emily from ECW Press. We're a medium-sized independent publisher. We're based in Toronto. Just celebrated our 50th anniversary, and we do kind of across the board in terms of genre. We do a lot of nonfiction, nature writing, politics, pop culture, music, sports. And then we also have an expanding fiction list, kind of moving into the speculative space, doing more horror and fantasy. And I guess kind of two goals from this program, one being, like everyone else said, right sales. We did have the opportunity to go to Guadalajara in 2019. And then I feel like that momentum kind of died with COVID. So kind of hoping to pick back up some of the things I learned there and expand on them. And then also we just switched distribution. So we are now with Simon & Schuster in the US, and they also distribute us internationally. So always looking to see if there are opportunities for export sales and just to understand the Mexican market a little bit more in that regard.
Okay, thank you. I keep losing the little, here we go. James.
Hey there, I'm James Patterson from University of Regina Press, sort of a press that does a trade and academic hybrid. I would echo most of the comments that are going on thus far, that we're looking at just like a general knowledge of the industry, access points to, create relationships with other presses, be they academic or independent trade. We do see opportunity there too.
Thank you. And James has been to Guadalajara, and it's a great fair if you get the chance to, and I'm glad to see a few of the people in this program will also be there. Laila, est-ce que c'est Lila?
Yes, Lila.
Lila, bonjour.
Yeah, I'm Lila from Édition dans de Lyon. We're a small independent publisher based in Montreal. We specialize in children's book, mostly nonfiction, mostly fiction, but also nonfiction. We are also a nonprofit, and our mission is to bring more diversity in children's book. We are just beginning to expand in terms of international exportations. So we are mainly also here to gather more information on the Mexican landscape, and we are mostly interested in selling rights.
Okay, thank you. I have, I think, from Sandy Pellerin des Éditions de Montagne here. I will read it in French. I apologize to everybody first. Je souhaite me familiariser avec la vente de droits, so right sales as well. Je prévoyais me rendre à Guadalajara, donc le projet de Montréal était une belle occasion. Je ne pourrais aller cette année. Nous avons vendu quelques titres dans la langue espagnole pour l'Amérique du Nord. Nous croyons que nous aurions un catalogue qui serait bien pour ce marché au niveau de certains titres et collections. Nous sommes basés à Montréal et nous publions depuis 18, c'est ça. Et notre catalogue est large, romans, guides pratiques, santé, famille, psychologie. So they have a very wide-ranging catalog, and they are also interested in right sales. Sandy was going to be at Guadalajara with us this year, but unfortunately can't attend, but very glad that she can be part of this project. And last but not least, Sarah Laudenbach.
There, I actually work with Emily at ECW. I'm just the
Okay.
sales and rights intern.
Okay, great. So you can go back to doing what you were doing, unless there's anything you wanted to add, but
No, I'm all
I
good,
think
thank you.
Emily said it for you. Thanks so much. Okay, back over to you, Nora.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, I'm starting to think about some options that we could work with you, especially because I see that many of you are on the children's books genre. So, well, I'm having a... Okay, so we're going to start with some context. This webinar tries to give you some context about the Mexican market right now and how the independent publishers try to adapt to this reality that is challenging in many ways. And that maybe will give you an idea of how they work and how they processes usually look in terms of time, how much time do they take to close a deal, for example, or how many books do they release every year, so you can get an idea of the size of these publishing houses and the rhythm of their, you know, their agenda in a year. So I don't remember who said that they're expecting to attend Guadalajara Book Fair next year, maybe, but they're starting with research. I think that that is the best way to do it, because Guadalajara is a really big fair. And if you get there, you will need to have already done some kind of contact, because if not, if you are completely new to the environment, it is gonna be a little hard to navigate, because it's a lot of people, and it's not the ideal context to start the contacts, but maybe to become closer, to get a deal, a deal or a collaboration of some kind. So I would say to maximize the work at Guadalajara, you should start your contacts by May or as early as you can. February is when the publishing in Mexico comes to life again, because with Guadalajara, it's like the big event, the main event of the year. So everyone starts preparing for Guadalajara in January, February, and you know, all those months, October, November, December, no one is really paying any attention to anything that is not related to Guadalajara or to the first fairs of the year, which are usually Palacio de Minería, that is on February, and it's like the start of the fair season that ends more or less in November with November, December with Guadalajara. But well, I'm not an economist, but I want to give you a picture of how is Mexico doing in terms of economy. Well, as you know, the pandemics in 2020 were a really difficult moment, challenging moment for publishers. Some of them learned new ways to communicate with the public, because libraries and bookshops and events and fairs were closed and canceled, and those are the principal ways in which publishers release or present their new books or the new authors. And obviously, in terms of sales, that had a really negative impact. But also in Mexico, well, post-pandemics, we experienced some growth that stopped by 2022. And now we are going through deceleration economically. So we had elections. It was a really complicated administration, because right before the pandemic hit, Mexico City was having some, Mexico City government was having some confrontation with feminist groups. So there was a little tension in the communication from the Mexico City government and the government, the president, and then the pandemic hit, everything stopped. But those ideas and those conflicts kind of lingered in the conversation. And as we approach the elections that just were, I mean, we just voted for the new president this year in July, and she took office in October. So there were many changes that kind of still had the pandemics and post-pandemics as the background. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but well, all these movements, all this social conflict affected economy. So Mexico made somehow was doing well before the pandemics, but somehow the growth was not as expected, and now a slowdown is expected. So books are not a priority for the Mexican market. We don't have we have one of the lowest I'm sorry, one of the lowest indices, I'm sorry, of sales, and we are going to get there, but I'm sorry, the Mexican environment is right now worried about many other things that affect economy. For example, insecurity, inequality. The narco is still a huge problem and a huge concern for Mexican society. And the government has, in the last administration, we still don't know how is it going to work, but the last administration changed a lot of the finance policies, which had an impact on the publishing sector, because we had lots of funding programs that kind of worked, or many of the independent publishers worked almost solely on this funding that came from the government, and all those funding suddenly changed. And also for the children book market, the education program, the national education program, used to buy some titles from different publishers, and those were like the most important sales of the year for them, and that program was canceled too. So these days it's a really complicated economic environment especially for publishing, because all these changes, all these conversations are affecting the way that they used to work. It is no longer adequate for this environment. And well, then in terms of reading, we have the National Office of Demographics, if you will, makes a survey that is called the MOLEC. We had that survey for the first time in 2015, and we had numbers that were not as expected. So one of the main purposes of the last government was to increase the amount of readers in Mexico. But what really happened is that, according to the MOLEC, this was not a successful strategy. Well, there are many theories to explain what really happened. The pandemics obviously had an impact on this, but this MOLEC study gets information from people over 18 years. And in that demographic, only almost 70% declared to have read some material. But these materials are really diverse. So, well, the first information that we get from this is that this 70% is lower, 14%, almost 15% lower than it was almost 10 years ago. So this is one of the biggest concerns right now for publishers, for educators, for universities, but also most read materials are books still. Most of them are books, but digital content comes second. I have direct contact with people this age, 18 and over 18, because I am still a university professor. And from 2007 to this day, I have seen this change, because when I first started teaching, well, when you asked someone to research about a topic, the students naturally would go to the library and research in books, right? And then they switched to Wikipedia, and then they switched to Google, and then to YouTube, and now they are in TikTok, right? So we are working with readers, especially young readers who don't really think of books as their first source of information, even for educational goals. So the reading average in Mexico is 3.2 books a year, and we have to consider that even even if a person reads 3 books a year, that doesn't necessarily mean that they buy 3 books a year, right? So, well, this is part of one of the biggest challenges for publishers in Mexico. So, well, in the publishing landscape in Latin America, Mexico is and has always been one of the references in culture in general. We are a big country, we have a big population, and we have a direct contact with the United States, so that makes you a really important place to think about when you are starting to a plan. We are kind of a bridge between Latin America and North America, right? So also we are the country with the largest Spanish-speaking population. And in terms of the amount of books that we produce a year, we are second place, just after Brazil, that is a really big country. But in terms of sales, we come fourth after Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia. So if we look at the investment in books per capita in Mexico, we can see that is low in comparison to Argentina, for example, right? So it's a complicated market to understand. We have a lot of potential, sure. We have very interesting authors and proposals in terms of creation, we are rich, and in terms of tradition, we are rich. And also, I think that in Spain or in Europe in general, they think of us as a reference in literature. But some factors in our environment are kind of stopping us from really getting the best of that potential. So, well, as it happens, I believe that that this is pretty clear for everyone, and it's the same for every Latin American country. The market is dominated by, in Mexico, by 2 of the biggest groups that are Planeta and Random House. This year, Hachette opened office in Mexico and is trying to get in the game for Mexico. We had some contacts with Hachette, but it is not as big as Planeta or Random House. They are really trying. They have a really aggressive strategy to enter the market. So I think that for you who are trying to enter this market, it would be a really good strategy to approach maybe Hachette, that is not as big as Planeta and Random right now, but maybe it will be in a few years. But well, in Mexico, independent publishing sees itself as a literary counterpart for these big publishing houses. And what I mean by that is that every independent publishing house that you are going to find in Mexico is going to have its focus on literature, nonfiction, fiction, or even in children's books, they don't make any educational content, textbooks or stuff like that, because they're trying to focus on cultural options, literature mainly. In Mexico, in the general market, the best sellers are textbooks and self-help, nonfiction. Mostly, I mean, the most successful self-help books are the ones that come from someone who has a radio show, for example, or in recent years, influencers, YouTubers, stuff like that. Those are the books that get popular in a year or two, and then they kind of fade, but they still have better numbers than fiction or literary fiction. So another problem is that bookstores, we are a big country, but most of the bookstores in Mexico are in Mexico City. And even in Mexico City, most of the bookstores that exist in Mexico City are in just one zone in the south of the city, in Coyoacán. So this makes really hard. I mean, we have a big market in terms of people and readers, but sometimes many of them don't really have access to bookstores. And Amazon is in Mexico, but I think that they are still stronger in Mexico City, in the center, in the big cities, Monterrey, Guadalajara. But people in other areas of Mexico are not really familiar with online shopping. So I have this experience of being invited to an event that looks really small in a different place of Mexico. And it's always full. Everyone wants to get a book, because what they say is that not many authors or not many publishers go outside of Mexico City. And as the public, they don't have many options. When they get one, they really want to seize it. So that's one of the blind spots still for the Mexican publishing market. This is starting to change, because in different places in the country, many little bookstores are starting to open. But even for the big chain bookstores, the book itself is not really the business. We have, well, the biggest bookstore in Mexico is not really a bookstore, it's a restaurant that is called Sanborns. Sanborns started as a drugstore in Mexico, and then they kind of amplified to a cafeteria, and then they started selling other stuff, books, toys, clothes, and then now is kind of a restaurant with a store attached to it. But as they have many restaurants in the country and they sell books, they are actually the biggest chain of bookstores, and they are not even a bookstore itself. The other ones are Gandhi and El Sótano, but they both live out of the little, all the things that you can sell. Well, the coffee, in the first place, they live out of coffee and notebooks, organizers, all that kind of stuff is what really sells in a bookstore in Mexico. So that's a challenge too. Independent publishers discovered in the pandemics that they could open their own online shops, and it has it was quite successful in the pandemics. Now that bookstores are open again, I'm not really sure. But for the independent, small publishing houses, sometimes events and fairs are the main distribution channel the strongest distribution channel they have. So, well, there are some book fairs that are official and are big. There are some book fairs that are organized by universities or even by the independent publishers to promote reading and to release their new books. And sometimes university presses or universities host events for their communities and for the general public, and those are quite successful too. We are going to talk about university presses in a moment, but well, this is more or less how the market works. So while the best-selling genres for traditional publishers, as I told you, are textbooks, children's and young adult books, fiction, novel is by far the best-selling genre, and health and personal development. Those are the top sellers for traditional publishers, for the big houses like Planeta and Random. Sometimes when you publish in one of those big houses, if you write fiction, for example, you don't get as much promotion as those health and personal development, for example, books. So for independent publishers is the opposite, because as I told you, independent publishers in Mexico understand themselves as a cultural counterpart for the big publishing houses. So they mainly focus on fiction with a strong stress in novels, with a strong attention in novels. But as independent publishers, they sometimes can also publish short fiction, for example, or even poetry. But the best-selling genre is always novel. Nonfiction has had an interesting growth in independent publishing, but it is mainly essay or memoir. In traditional publishing, the nonfiction that is more successful comes from journalism, for example, or health and personal development. In nonfiction, personal essay, memoir, stuff like that is what is more appealing for the readers or for the community that every publisher has built around their catalog. And in independent publishing, there are some children's and young adult houses, and they have a strong focus on literature, and some of them, well, we are going to talk about one of them. Some of them are as specialized as to have collections for babies, for example, for literature for babies. So independent publishing in Mexico is strongly focused on national authors or Latin American authors. They don't buy translation rights unless, well, there have to exist or coexist some circumstances that could make it easier for them to get to buy translation rights. First of all, some of these editors, the editors that work at these publishing houses, have studied abroad. So they made some contacts and with people in the publishing environment or in the literary environment of cities like New York. So sometimes when they get those rights, they do it because they know the author or they know the translator. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that in Mexico, sometimes the translation rights sales depends more on the translator than on the editor or the publishing house. I'm going to explain that a little bit in a moment. So, well, sometimes it depends on they know the author or they know a scout or an agent that's recommended this manuscript, so they get the translation rights. So if it comes with this kind of recommendation, it has more possibilities to get published. But also, these translation rights or the sales of these translations rights can be determined by relevance. If there's an editorial trend or something in the social conversation that editors believe that is going to be appealing for the readers in the next year, or that has proved that it has been successful in other countries, there's a big possibility that they are interested in this, in acquiring these rights. But what is I mean, the most important or the most important factor for a publishing house in Mexico for an independent publishing, at least, to buy rights, translation rights, is the personal taste or the background of the publishing house or the editor. So maybe the key to start the contact with these publishing houses, with these independent publishing houses, is to get to know their catalog. And if you find one title that is if you can find an analogy in their catalog to the title that you are trying to submit, you have more possibilities than I'm sorry. So, well, I don't know if you have any. I think that you can send your questions in the chat, and we are going to talk about them at the end of the session. But what I wanted to do, as I know that these translation rights depends, or getting translation rights depends strongly on the publishing house identity, I tried to select for you some of the biggest publishing houses in Mexico in the independent environment. And I chose them because they are the ones that have more relevance in terms of sales. They have more time in the market. And all of them, almost all of them, are trying or have contacts with the Latin American market or even with Spain. They are trying to expand their reach to other countries. So first of all, what you have to, something that would be useful for you to know is that there are some organizations. The most important of them is the CANIEM. The CANIEM includes the big houses, but also they have a division, a special division for the independent publishing houses. In Mexico, we have more than 100 or more than 200 of independent publishing houses. Some of them are really, really small, with a catalog of less than 10 or 20 titles. But some of them are really important, and they are in the bookstores, and they are really influential in the environment. So some of them belong to the CANIEM, not all of them, but if in terms of influence, maybe the CANIEM is the biggest organization in the industry for Mexico. And then in the second place comes the AEMI, which is a specialized association that works exclusively with independent publishers. But yeah, well, some of the publisher houses work with one, some of them go with another, but in terms of influence, those would be the two biggest associations. Then the LEI and the RELI. The LEI is a little association, is more for the small houses, and what they do is mostly collaborate to organize fairs or sales or events or stuff like that to try to promote their releases, because many of the publishers that are in the lay are not into the big bookstores. I don't know how it works in Canada, but for the Mexican market, bookstores have some requirements to enter, and not every publisher is able to meet them. So the smallest independent publishers organize in the lay, and they try to create a market for them. And the rally is actually not a publisher association, but an independent bookstores network. Independent bookstores are starting to grow in Mexico, and they started, I mean, I think that in 2012, the first ones appeared in Mexico City, and now some of them are in other cities of Mexico. This is starting to grow, but it's important to get to know some of them who are really collaborating with the big publishing houses. So these are the organizations, and now we are going to talk about the publishers.
Nora, sorry, I just wanted to jump in because we're closing in on the hour.
Yes.
In case people had questions they want to ask now. The list, so I think most of you have had a chance to look at the slides that Nora's prepared. There's a lot of really good information about independent publishing houses that would be interesting. So if you had specific questions about those, or more general questions about what you've heard so far, this would be a good time, I think, to add them, unless there's something really, really key you wanted to add about those specific publishers, but maybe that's something that people can ask you about at a later date in the one-on-one sessions. But if there's any, is it okay if we break now for questions, or you can finish some of the presentation notes now?
I don't know how it's up to you.
Well, I think most people probably have about an hour. So that if anyone has a question, this is the time to ask it. And if you don't have questions, then we'll let Nora proceed for the next 12 minutes or so. How's that? I don't see any questions. Oh, I have someone say I have questions. Someone's coming with questions, so they're coming here. Maybe I'll just I can unmute rather than use the Q&A if that will work. So it's Danielle.
Sure.
Let me see. I can't see you on my list. There we go. Danielle, do you want to do it in the chat or unmute yourself? Or in the Q&A section? I don't see the Q&A.
Sorry, it just took a while to unmute. It's Judy again.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I have two questions. One is, when we're dealing with Spanish publishers, they always want to include Latin America. We always want to separate Latin America because we feel that there's an opportunity there to, like, we would like to exploit the opportunity to try and sell rights in Latin America. Sometimes it's a little bit of a make or break. Sometimes we say you have a year worth, and if you don't do anything substantial in the Latin American market, we retain those rights. Like, there are various things that we do. But what's your sense of how that all works in the Latin American market, the Spanish publishers distributing in the Latin American market? That's my first question. Then I have another one, so I'll let you answer that one.
Okay, for the big publishers, when they sign anything, manuscript or translation rights or whatever, they sign for the whole Spanish-speaking territories, like for the planet. That's pretty standard for the big publishing houses. It's like 7 years in every Spanish-speaking territory. So, and unfortunately, they have the exclusive rights for all those territories, but they can't guarantee that they are going to publish. For example, Planeta has an office in Mexico, an office in United States, I think in Miami. an office in Colombia, an office in Buenos Aires, an office in Peru. And if they sign the rights with you in Mexico for Planeta Mexico, they're only going to release your book in Mexico. They are not responsible for they can't guarantee that they're going to release that in any other territory unless I don't know if sales are really good in the first 3 months, maybe they can consider that. Or if you have the contact with the offices in the different countries, which is extremely hard to get. If you already have the contact and all the offices declare that they are interested in publishing the book for their territories, that can work. But it's kind of tricky. If you sell to those big houses, they're going to ask for that, and they won't accept a negative on that. But for independent publishing houses, they usually cover only Mexico, only this only this country, and you have more freedom to offer that to other countries. And sometimes some of these publishers have contacts with other independent publishers. For example, Elefanta, that is one of the publishers that we had on the presentation. They recently launched, I think, a nonfiction prize, and they collaborate with independent publishers from 7 different countries, I think. So they guaranteed to the winner manuscript that they were going to have an edition in every one of these different publishers. But that's that's kind of tricky. For the big publishers, it's going to be a standard. They're going to acquire the rights for every Spanish-speaking country, and I don't think you can get out of that requirement.
Okay. And then my next question is, what's the best way to get, is there a way that you can suggest, and whether it's through these organizations or whatever, because we know getting editors' names is the most important thing. We don't, everybody has rights contacts up on their websites, but we don't, because we're trying to sell, we're trying to find the editors. So is there like an association of editors or something that, like, you've got these organizations here, but really we're trying to dig down to get the editors or the publishers or people who are making acquisitions decisions? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, for translation rights, in my experience, the best way to get to the editors is through the translators. Because sometimes a translator finds a book that they really like, and they're the ones who go to the editors and say, I would really like to translate this. And for independent publishers, in Mexico at least, there are some funding or programs that the translator can submit the proposal for this funding. And if they get them, this funding covers the edition. So they partnered with a publishing house in submitting the proposal, and then it's the translator, the publishing house, and sometimes the translator has already contacted the author or the original publishing house. So translators are key in this process, especially with independent publishers. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So yeah, just to add to that, I'm not sure if there's something like this in Mexico, but in Colombia, when we were there for Filbo last year, we met with the Translators Association, and they were very interested in Canadian books and Canadian titles and being able to find books that would be of interest to them as translators to then propose to their publishers. So that might also be a useful avenue on a national scale. Are there any other questions so far? It would seem that there's not. If anybody has a question, again, now is the time, or forever hold your peace. And then it looks like it's pretty clear now. So Nora, we have in the remaining 5 minutes, I'll let you sort of wrap up and say your final words.
Okay. So, well, I have here some of the most representative or relevant right now independent publishers in Mexico. Well, Ediciones Era is, I mean, the biggest in terms of tradition. Some of the biggest Mexican writers started in this publishing house in the 70s or something like that. So some of the rights of these authors have already been brought to the transnationals, but still Era holds this prestige. They publish fiction, nonfiction, poetry, essay, and even some academic materials. So it's a really interesting house to get to know. Sexto Piso is by far one of the interesting or is one of the most relevant publishers, and I think that you should try to approach them if you work with adult fiction, nonfiction. Their catalog is really diverse. I mean, they publish classics in illustrated editions, novel, essay, children's books even, and nonfiction. They have over 400 titles. They are one of the biggest catalogs in independent publishing right now. And in each one of these slides, I mentioned some authors that are like the biggest authors in terms of sales for these publishers, because I think that if you get to know the work of these authors and you can find an equivalence in your catalog, it's easier for you if you approach the editors like that. If you say, I see that you published this book by Valeria Luiselli, and I have the equivalent for the Canadian market. That is an easier way for them to understand what you are trying to submit. Almadía is another of the, I mean, the three biggest publishing houses in Mexico are in the independent environment are Era, Almadía, and Sexto Piso. Almadía has Sexto Piso as well, and Almadía have offices in Mexico and in Spain, so they start to grow to Europe. And in their catalog, they have literature, essay, memoir, even theater, journalism, and they have almost 500 titles. So they publish around 20 new titles per year. I know that for some of you, this is like, it's not as big as, well, I think that the big publishers release 100 books a week. So 20 books per year is almost nothing, but yes, I give you this information so you can understand why sometimes it feels like the deals are slow to come to reality, but it is because of the size of the operation of these publishers. So for these publishers, I selected some of their biggest authors. Elefanta could be interesting for you because it's one of the most active translation rights. They're always searching for books, but they specialize in authors from colonized countries and regions. They're really distinctive in Mexico because they are the one editorial that brings Brazilian literature to Mexico that is really hard to find here. So Elefanta does that work, and they also publish nonfiction, young adult poetry, but mainly narrative. And they're growing like really fast. Antílope also has also published translations of books or essays by Mary Baird, Rebecca Solnit, who are really well-known authors in the English-speaking world. So this could be a good option for you, but they are focused on adult fiction and nonfiction. And for the children's and young adults, I selected Ediciones El Naranjo because they have recently obtained the Bologna Best Children's Publisher of the Year in 2022. as the best publisher of Central and South America. So I think that this could be an option that could be interesting for you. And well, I don't know if we have time. I think not, but well, we have covered some of these points. One of the biggest challenges for the independent publishers is distribution. Not all of them are available at every major bookstore, so they have to create their own fairs or shops or events to sell their books. Not all of them get the same exposure and positioning as the big publishers. I mean, even when they get in the bookstores, they don't get the same exposure. And they compete with Amazon. Not many of them are in Amazon, and then they compete with them in distribution and in pricing. Also, many of them, almost all of them, depended on the funding from the government. And as these programs have been cut in the last administration, they're starting to find new ways to finance their projects. Some of them have started to make pre-sales or campaigns like that because I mean, their operation dependent on that kind of funding, and then that doesn't exist anymore. So they are trying to learn how to work in this new environment. Some of them even declare that all of the money they get is it goes to reinvestment, or they have no profit at all in all the 20 years that they've been in the business. I don't know if this is different in Canada, but I mean, this is pretty standard in Latin America. And well, as I told you, with no funding, they have come to try new strategies. Some of them have subscription models. Sexto Piso has a subscription model where you pay 300 pesos a month and you get a book and, you know, stickers or something like that. They have merchandising like tote bags and t-shirts and stickers, bookmarkers. Sometimes they organize crowdfunding. They release they campaign for the release of a new book, and they start the funding a funding campaign in internet, and sometimes the pre-sales. They have a special price for a new release, and that is a way to capitalize their publishing house. And also in the pandemic, they really had to learn how to promote themselves beyond events and bookstores. So right now, most of the independent publishers depend on digital marketing, e-commerce, so that their own shops in their websites, and virtual events prove to be a great strategy because when in traditional book release, all the events were in Mexico City or in the big fairs in Mexico City or in Guadalajara. But the pandemic proved that there was a big public looking for this kind of event, and that increased the reach of some of the releases, so they kept this kind of promotion. And well, many of them join or collaborate to get through. So co-editing is very common in independent publishing in Mexico. Sometimes they work with the government, sometimes they work with the university presses. If you approach that would be a really good place to start. If you approach a university press, university presses also could be interested in translation rights, but you should be you should look for their catalog first and see if the manuscripts that you're trying to submit are aligned with what they are interested in publishing right now. So, well, in that aspect, the biggest university presses in Mexico are the UNAM, obviously, Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, who has their own press to publish. I mean, every faculty or research institute has their own press to launch the results of their professors' work, which is highly specialized, but they also have one association, not association, but division called Livres UNAM. And Livres UNAM is mainly cultural, like fiction, nonfiction, young adult, children's books. And they work, they sometimes partner with independent publishers. So the university presses can also be a good entry point for you into the Mexican market. The biggest are UNAM, and UAM is trying to increase their cultural publications beyond the specialized books, and also not as big, but also two presses that collaborate with independent publishers are the UANL, the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León, which is in Monterrey. And they sometimes make co-editions with independent publishers. And the Universidad Veracruzana is not as big in co-editing, but they have a long tradition. They have a really important prize for first novel. So maybe you should consider them also as an option to collaborate. Well, I think that's it, pretty much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nora. That's great. And as I said before, there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to share some of this content with the program participants as the online, the one-on-one sessions carry on. And also, of course, if there's any questions that any of you still have after the session that you want to send us by email right away before it escapes your memory and you move on to the other things you have to do in the day, please feel free to send us anything by email. You have Nora's email, or if you like, you can send it to me and I can redirect to her. But I want to thank you, Nora. This was great. I've learned a lot already about just really the changing context in Mexico. We'd heard a lot about the administration, the impact that was having on publishing when we were at Guadalajara last year. So it's good to see what's kind of the other side of that, how that's playing out now. And yeah, I really look forward to hearing about the rest of this program, how you guys are doing and what you get out of this. It looks like there's a lot of interesting options right now on the ground in Mexico. Thank you everyone for joining us. I have to thank the Government of Canada, Canadian Heritage in particular, for giving us the funding to do this. So thank you, and thanks everyone for your time today. Thank you very much to our interpreters, who we couldn't do this without you. Thanks so much, and we'll be chatting with all of you soon, and looking forward to hearing about your experience in the program. Gracias, Nora. A la próxima.
Thank you.